Most people don't struggle with Flexbox because it's hard. They struggle because they're learning it the wrong way. So instead of going through every single property, I'm going to show you the few things that actually matter, the part that makes everything finally click. And to do that, we're going to fix this layout right here. It looks simple, but it's broken. Things aren't aligned properly, the spacing feels off, and it's not behaving the way you would expect. And instead of just fixing it instantly, we're going to go step by step, using it to understand exactly how Flexbox works. So basically, Flexbox is a one-dimensional layout system, one axis at a time, either a row or a column. It's not grid. Grid handles two dimensions simultaneously. Flexbox is for arranging items along a single direction, a navigation bar, a row of cards, or a centered element. The moment you need rows and columns independently controlled, that's when you reach for grid. But for most UI patterns, buttons, navbars, card rows, or stacking, Flexbox is exactly right. Before we touch anything, one thing you need to know. Every layout has two parts. The container, which is the parent, and the items inside it. Some properties go on the container, others go on the items. When Flexbox isn't behaving, it's almost always because a property is in the wrong place. So as we go, I'll always make it clear which one we are targeting here. Alright, let's actually fix this. The first thing we need is display flex on the container, so you can break the line and write here, display flex. Items go from stacking vertically to sitting in a row, one line. Now everything in Flexbox from this point depends on direction. By default, it's a row, left to right, but watch what happens when I switch it to column. So flex direction column, and now everything flips vertically. And this is exactly where most people get confused, because suddenly the same properties stop working the way they expect. Here's why. Flexbox always aligns things based on the direction you chose. One property follows the direction and the other crosses it. Keep that in mind. It will make the next part click immediately. I'm going to remove this line because we want flex direction row and we don't want the column, so I just removed this and by default it will switch to row. The two properties you will use constantly are justify content, so I'm gonna write here justify content, and also align items. We are in a row, so left to right is our main direction. That means justify content moves things horizontally. Let me set this to center, so justify content center. Now everything moves to the middle. Now align items does the opposite. It controls the other direction, so let me add that. Align items center, and also I'm gonna add a height of 300 pixels, so now we can see the align items working. So I'm gonna turn this off so you can see the difference, and I'm gonna turn this on again. So now you can see that the container is perfectly centered. No hats, no weird positioning tricks, just 3 lines of CSS. That's it, and now watch what happens when I change justify content to space between. Items is spread out and pushed to the edges, and if I try here space around, it will distribute the spacing evenly around each one. This is exactly how navbars and card rows are built. Now, what if you need just one item to behave differently? You don't touch the container. You go to that specific item and use align self. For example, we're gonna change the position of the last item, so you can write here item last child, and inside this class we are going to write align self flex end. That one element moves independently while the others stay exactly where they are. That's the kind of control Flexbox gives you without breaking everything else. Up until now, everything has been on a single line, and that's actually the default. Flexbox will keep items in one row even if they overflow. Let me add more items and show you what I mean. So let's go to the HTML, and I'm gonna add the 5th and 6th and 7th, 5, 6, 7. Now you can see that the items cannot fit into the container. It is actually overflowing. It just keeps pushing everything out. The container doesn't care. This is where flex wrap comes in. So let's go to our index.css, and in the container we can write here flex wrap wrap. Now items move to the next line when there's no space left. Resize the browser and the layout adapts. No media queries, nothing complicated, but the spacing still looks off. A lot of people reach for margin here and end up fighting weird edges and uneven gaps. You don't need that. So instead we can add a gap of 1 rem here, and now you can see the items evenly distributed. So we don't need a margin here to separate the items. This is looking weird because of this last child element here, so I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to remove this justify content. Now you can see that it actually looks better. So this gap here creates a space between all the items evenly without touching the outside edges, and it works with grid too. So once you start using it, you basically never go back. Now the part where most people get confused is the flex property. So I'm going to write here in the item flex 1, and this is what happens. So if I hover over this property, this code is going to show here that flex is a shorthand for flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. Basically in this case, flex 1 is sharing the space equally between the items. And for example, if for the last child I'd find here that it has a flex 2, you will see that it takes more space than the others. That's grow. Now if we do some changes here in our code, so removing the flex 1 from the item class and adding a width of 300 pixels and removing the flex wrap from the container, we can see that they are evenly distributed in space. But I'd like to show you the flex shrink, so we can write here item last child. You can see that nothing happens because by default it has this value. So if we set this to 0, this is what happens. That item refuses to compress, everything else shrinks around it. And finally, flex basis. It is the item's starting size before grow and shrink do anything. Think of it as its wish size, and instead of width we can say here flex basis 10 pixels, and this is what happens. And if we write here flex basis 200 pixels, that is what happens. And we can also remove this from here, from the item, and give this flex basis only to the last child, only to the last item. So this is the final result. It starts at 200 pixels and the other rules take over from there. So in practice, this flex one is the one you will use the most, and it is a shorthand or flex 1, 1, and 0%, meaning everything grows equally from 0. That's your go-to for equal width columns. Alright, right now we are going to build 3 things you will actually use. So starting with a navbar, we can clear this HTML here, and then we can define a nav with the class navbar. It has a div with the class logo. The logo contains the text my brand. We can have an unordered list here with the class navlinks with 3 items, so li multiplied by 3. The first one is home, the second one is about, and the third one is work. After this UL, we have a button with the class CTA, and the text of this button is get started. So basically, we would have a logo on the left, links in the middle, and a button on the right. Now let's add the CSS. So I'm going to delete all of this, and we are going to write these styles: navbar with the display flex, align items center, a justify content space between, a padding of 1 rem for the top and bottom and 2 rem for the left and right, a background color of F9, 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 and a font family Arial. We can also style our nav links here. It will have a display flex, a gap of 1.5 rem. Without the gap, the nav would look like this, but with the gap, it looks way better. And also a list style none to remove those bullet points. And to finish this, we can define our CTA as padding 0.5 rem and 1.25 rem, a background color of 4F46E5, which is a blue color, and the text will be white with a border none. The border radius here will have a 6 pixels value, so it will be a little bit rounded, and a cursor pointer, so when you hover over the button, it looks like the button is clickable. So with this basic CSS and HTML, you already made a navbar. It is clean, but there is an even better trick for pushing that button to the far right. Instead of relying on this space between, we can comment this line, and in the CTA class, we can add a margin left auto here. So margin left auto, and we also have the same result, of course, with the nav items in the left. It's not centered because we are not using the space between anymore. But talking about the button, the reason that this works is that auto margins in Flexbox absorb all the remaining space. So no matter what's before it, that button always gets pushed to the edge. And that's one of the most useful things in Flexbox. Now let's see another pattern. We have a card row, so we can remove all of this, and we can add a div with the class cards. And inside this div, we have 3 cards. So we can write .card multiplied by 3. The first one is card 1, then card 2, and then card 3. And then in the CSS, we can write here cards display flex wrap, a gap of 1 rem and a padding of 1 rem. Then for the card, we can add here a flex 1, a min width of 200 pixels, a padding of 2 rem, a background color of 4F46E5. The text color is white. The font family is Arial, a border radius of 8 pixels to make the card look a little bit rounded, and a text aligned center. So now we have our cards. We can increase here the viewport of the browser to see the 3 cards in a row, and if we reduce the width of the browser, we can see the cards shrinking. So we have here equal width cards, spacing handled by gap, and they reflow on their own when the browser gets narrow. No media queries, nothing extra. That's flex 1 here, and the flex wrap working together. And the last one we are going to make is a sticky footer, so this one trips up a lot of people. Let's go into our HTML and remove this code. We can add here a class page, and inside we have a header with a text header, a main tag with a text main content, and a footer with a text footer. In the CSS, we can clear this and add the class page with the styles display flex direction column, a min height of 100 VH. Let me just remove from the global elements the margin and remove the padding as well. So now the min height is working correctly, and if we give a background color aqua here, you can see the height working. If we remove this, you can also see how it would look like if we haven't defined this min height. Alright, I'm going to remove this background color here and add a font family Arial. Now for the header and footer, I'm going to add a padding of 1 rem and 2 rem and a background color of 4F46E5 and a color white for the text. And for the main tag, we can add a flex 1 and a padding of 2 rem, and that's what we get. The page wrapper is a flex column that takes up the full viewport height. The header and footer are whatever size they need to be, and main has a flex one, which means it stretches to fill everything in between, pushing the footer to the bottom, no matter how little content is on the page. 3 properties and 0 JavaScript. So before we finish, you need to understand that Flexbox is not meant for everything. The moment your layout needs rows and columns controlled at the same time, you will start fighting it. That's the sign you should be using Grid instead. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think Flexbox and Grid compete, but they don't. They solve different problems. In real projects, you'll use both. Grid for the overall structure and Flexbox for the pieces inside. So once you understand that, you stop forcing solutions and you will start choosing the right tool. So that's what actually matters in Flexbox in 2026. It's not about memorizing properties, but once you understand direction and alignment, everything else follows. Now you know how Flexbox works, but what happens when your layout needs rows and columns at the same time?